Have you ever wondered what a research gap is and how to find one? Well, you're in the right place. Let's embark on a journey of discovery, starting with the basics. A research gap, often referred to as a literature gap, is an unanswered question or an unresolved problem within a specific field of study. These gaps might arise from a lack of existing research or contradicting findings in the current literature. So why are these gaps important? Well, they are the driving force behind the evolution of knowledge. They are the reason we continue to ask questions, to explore, to discover. They push the boundaries of what we know and understand about the world around us. More practically, they're crucial when it comes to academic research. Whether you're working on a dissertation, a thesis, or a research project, identifying these gaps is a fundamental step in your journey. It's like finding a puzzle piece that no one else has noticed and realizing it's just what's needed to complete the picture. Cool, right? But how do these gaps come into existence? Imagine a tree of knowledge. Each branch represents a field of study, each leaf a piece of research. However, there are areas where the foliage is sparse, where questions are yet to be asked, where problems are yet to be solved. These are our research gaps. They might be hiding in plain sight or buried beneath piles of other information, but they're there, waiting to be discovered. It's also worth noting that research gaps aren't static. They're constantly changing and evolving as new research is conducted, as our understanding of the world evolves, and as societal needs change. So, the search for research gaps is an ongoing process. It's a continuous journey of discovery, curiosity, and learning. Now that you understand what a research gap is and why it's important, let's delve into the different types of research gaps. Buckle up, because this journey of discovery is about to get even more exciting. First off, we have the classic literature gap and the disagreement gap. Let's begin with the classic literature gap. This is a fascinating type of research gap that often occurs when we're dealing with new concepts or phenomena that haven't been thoroughly studied yet. Imagine being an explorer venturing into uncharted territories with a sense of curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. That's what encountering a classic literature gap feels like. You're presented with an opportunity to explore new areas, but since there's a lack of existing studies directly related to the topic, you often need to draw on adjacent literature to build your research. It's like piecing together a puzzle with pieces borrowed from different sets, but the final picture is entirely unique and contributes something new to the world of knowledge. Now, let's move on to the disagreement gap. This type of research gap arises when existing research presents contrasting or even contradictory findings on a specific question. Picture yourself in a debate where both sides present compelling arguments, and it's your job to make sense of it all. That's the essence of a disagreement gap. It's important to note that this gap requires a balanced set of opposing findings. It's not about outlier studies that deviate from the norm, but rather about substantial research that genuinely conflicts. Tackling a disagreement gap can be challenging, but it's also an opportunity to bring clarity to a contentious issue and maybe even find a middle ground. So we've covered the classic literature gap, where you're exploring new territories, and the disagreement gap, where you're resolving conflicts in existing research. These two types of gaps are fairly common, but there's more to the story. In our next scene, we'll delve into the contextual gap and the methodological gap, two other types of research gaps that you might encounter in your scholarly adventures. Stay tuned and keep those explorer hats on. These two types of gaps are fairly common, but there's more to the story. Continuing from where we left off, we have the contextual gap and the methodological gap. A contextual gap is like a puzzle missing pieces in specific areas. The overall picture is clear, but certain sections are left blank. This type of gap emerges when substantial research exists on a topic, but it lacks studies in specific contexts. These contexts could be different populations, geographical locations, or time periods. For example, a multitude of studies might have explored the impact of social media on teenagers, but few may have examined its effects on senior citizens. This gap offers the opportunity to build on a solid foundation of existing research, but with a fresh perspective. The second type is the methodological gap, which is akin to trying to paint a portrait with only half the color palette. This gap emerges when the research methodology in existing studies falls short in some way. It might be that the majority of studies on a topic have used quantitative methods, leaving a void for qualitative perspectives, or perhaps the research has been primarily experimental and there's a need for observational studies. This type of gap highlights the need for a different research approach or perspective. For instance, numerous studies might have quantified the correlation between stress and productivity using surveys and statistical analysis. However, a methodological gap would exist if there's a lack of qualitative research exploring individuals' personal experiences and perceptions of this relationship. Both the contextual and methodological gaps offer unique opportunities to contribute to existing literature. Recognizing a contextual gap allows you to bring new context into the research conversation, while identifying a methodological gap lets you enhance the depth and breadth of understanding on a topic. In essence, these gaps are like open doors, inviting you to bring your unique perspective and research skills to shed light on the less explored areas of your field. They're the stepping stones to making your own mark in the world of knowledge. Understanding these different types of gaps can drastically improve your ability to conduct effective research. Now you might be wondering, how do you find these research gaps? Well, let's delve into that. The first step is quite simple. Gather literature reviews, systematic reviews, and meta-analyses relevant to your area of interest. Think of it as a treasure hunt, where the gold is the unanswered questions and unresolved problems in your field. But don't just grab any old treasure map. It's important to focus on recent publications. Why, you ask? Well, the world of research is always evolving. What might have been a gap 5 years ago could now be the subject of multiple studies. You want to avoid outdated gaps, so make sure to keep up with the latest developments. Now, once you've gathered these resources, it's time to put on your detective hat. Look closely at each piece. Pay special attention to sections titled Further Research Opportunities or Limitations. These sections are like clues left behind at the scene of a crime, often indicating where research gaps may exist. But don't just skim through them. Read them thoroughly, understand the context, and question everything. Why did the author suggest a need for further research? What limitations did they acknowledge in their study? Could a different approach or perspective shed new light on the topic? Remember, it's not just about finding a gap, it's about finding a meaningful gap that can add value to the existing body of knowledge. So, as you analyze these clues, keep asking yourself, how can I contribute? Once you've finished your analysis, take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What patterns do you see? Are there recurring themes or unanswered questions that stand out? Utilize this analysis to orient yourself with the current state of research and identify potential gaps. Now it's time to formulate a list of candidate topics for your research. This is your opportunity to make a unique contribution to your field, so take your time, choose wisely. And remember, it's not just about filling a gap, it's about advancing knowledge and understanding. By applying this strategy, you can identify potential gaps and formulate a list of candidate topics for your research. And who knows, you might just stumble upon the next big breakthrough in your field. That's it. Now you know what a research gap is, its types, and how to find one. We've taken a deep dive into this crucial aspect of research, shedding light on its importance in the world of academia and beyond. Remember, research gaps or literature gaps are those unanswered questions or unresolved issues in any given field. Identifying these gaps is akin to finding a needle in a haystack, but once found, they can pave the way for groundbreaking studies and discoveries. We discuss the different types of research gaps, each presenting unique opportunities and challenges. The classic literature gap, for instance, allows you to explore new territories, while the disagreement gap invites you to balance opposing findings. On the other hand, the contextual gap encourages you to delve into specific contexts that have been overlooked, and the methodological gap challenges you to reconsider existing research approaches. Finding these research gaps is like embarking on an exciting treasure hunt. It's a process that requires you to gather literature reviews, systematic reviews, and meta-analyses relevant to your area of interest. By focusing on the further research opportunities or limitations sections, you'll likely discover where the gaps exist. This analysis will help you understand the current state of research and identify potential gaps that could form the basis for your own study. So, as we wrap up this enlightening journey, I encourage each of you to apply these concepts in your research endeavors. Whether you're working on a dissertation, a thesis, or a research project, knowing how to identify and address research gaps is a skill that will undoubtedly set you apart. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more research tips and advice. Always remember, effective research starts with identifying the right gaps.